welcome everyone to another episode of The Independent Mindset, the podcast for candid conversations, staying curious, and being better. So today we're going to talk about wealth transfer. Before that, Jason, it's been a while, so let's catch up a little bit. And apologies for any members of the audience. You know, those 2, 3, 4 fans maybe we have that listened to the podcast that didn't get a new episode last week. We were both just completely busy with other things. The full-time jobs were taking over a little bit. So yeah, we're back this summer. Anyways, we'll let you know in advance if we ever skip a week or two. But yeah, happy to be back for this one. So Jason, what's up, man?
Well, yeah, it's good to be back. I'll take responsibility for last week. I've been juggling quite a bit between work and other obligations. But I'm glad to be back in the saddle. But same thing as always. It seems like I'm always doing the same. I'm doing renovations and I'm working away and trying to build a few things along the way. How about you, buddy?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. I think your work is way busier right now. And then I think you hit up a bachelor party with our buddy Ricky, who was on the show last, 2 weeks ago now. Ricky, our friend, the plumber. So congrats to him. He's getting married in the fall, right?
Yeah. Well, no, in a couple weeks.
August. Yeah. Okay. So end of this month. Yeah. So congrats to our buddy Ricky. But on my end, yeah, renovations as well, man. I finished the hardwood floors in the second floor, which is just a pain in the ass. It is backbreaking work. Literally, it's just up and down on your knees. Just ugh. And then we had some fun with the baby's room. So
I saw the wall there. You make kind of like geometrics or something.
Yeah,
like
a little cool geometric accent wall. It's a green wall, and then we painted the rest. So yeah, last weekend we basically my wife and I spent most of the time painting.
Oh, very nice. Well, it's a nice activity together.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, we're here in New Brunswick. The restrictions just got lifted for the whole RONA thing.
And I'm happy for you guys. I'm jealous and equally jealous and happy for you guys. No masks, no worries for a while.
No nothing, and it's strange to celebrate what should have been normal for a very, very long time. In my humble opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
So it was kind of funny because we went. Rick's busy too. Runs his business like we had on the last episode. I know he was looking for just some time away. Turn the phone off, just kind of rest and relax. So that's how we geared that bachelor party. When we did yours, we made it a little bit more active, a little bit more social. But in Rick's case, I knew he kind of wanted more of a vacation. So,
and I would too after this year and a half too of I would want to get out of the city probably.
Yeah, I would understand that. So anyways, we went to the woods, we camped for a little while, we drank an absurd amount of beer, and we just shot guns. we must have put like 400 rounds downrange. We just had a great time. But anyway, so we just went to this campground, not too half hour out of town, just really not that far, but still in the middle of the woods because that's New Brunswick. And
just for anyone who doesn't know New Brunswick, unless you're a small town on the coast, on basically the northeast and south shores of New Brunswick, the rest is entirely forest. A bit of farmland, but entirely forest. Other than that,
yeah, you got if New Brunswick was a game of Catan, it would be 95% trees and a couple wheats, and that's about it.
Yeah, exactly. A couple weeks, and then you'd have your docks, along the side.
Yeah, have your docks. Maybe one sheep, but no. Well, you'd have maybe one stone, but no brick. But it would be all forest.
Yeah, anyways, forest. That's a good analogy, actually.
So we went. We shot. We went out. Did our thing. Came back. We come back to the campsite, and I'd noticed before we left the owner was a real small thing, real smart guy, just owns a great big large acreage and made a small business. So you can think of the taxation benefits and all that. Real smart setup when you look at it. But we noticed before leaving, he had a little makeshift stage and was starting to pull out just musical instruments. He had a couple of drums coming out. Buddy was there with a Telecaster. It just looked like a couple of guys just having fun in the yard. But we come back to the campsite and there's 100 cars just piled in, waiting to get into the yard. So we come in from the other side. And there was someone at the front entrance like, "Oh, are you here for the concert?" We said, "No, we're staying here this evening." They're like, "Oh, okay, well, go to your site, have fun." So we do, and we'll make food, crack a beer, and then we start to hear the show. And we're like, "Well, there's obviously something going on." So we go over, and it was the biggest redneck fest possible. It was so good. There was not a mask anywhere. It smelled like weed. Everyone there was Budweiser and mullets for days. It was fantastic. Everyone was chill. Everyone was cool. It was just a big old party of rednecks, and it was glorious.
Living the life.
100% living the life. I've
Yeah.
honestly never
Well,
seen such a dense collection of mullets in my life.
really? Okay. Because we've seen our fair share of mullets.
Yeah, I know. Like, that's from a born and raised in New Brunswick perspective. But I mean,
Yeah.
like, they came out to play.
All right. All right. Yeah, it's good. So it's kind of like a little version of, I don't know if you caught any shots of Lollapalooza in outside of Chicago.
I didn't know.
That was nuts. You should look that up. It's just, and it made the news because like you couldn't ignore it in this, COVID era. But it's like thousands upon thousands of like young bodies stacked on top of each other for like, a big concerts, which is Lollapalooza is the annual one, I think, around Chicago or whatever.
Okay.
But holy crap. You're like, yep, that's because people have been locked up for almost 2 years. And
Will, what are you talking about? You can absolutely ignore thousands of people gathering. Just look at the southern U.S. border. That's nothing to see here. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Or Obama's party. Did you hear about that?
The cages, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you hear about Obama's party too?
Yeah. 700
people
at Martha's Vineyard.
It's funny. Do you know what? I haven't heard the mainstream media call it a super spreader once yet.
But you are supposed to donate to his cause, though.
Oh, okay.
Sheep.
So
see you in the gulags.
So actually, do you, I haven't thought of one, but for our recurring segment, which we haven't done in a few episodes because we had a guest canceled. Is there anything on your mind that you think will be canceled next?
Other than rights and freedoms?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was probably just going to say the charter.
What charter? Nothing to see here. There's no charter. What are you talking about? Step into this cart.
Should we both agree that just the charter is today's canceled?
I don't even know what you're talking about. What's a charter?
Yeah, there you go. Yep. The right to assemble, the right to practice religion, the right to travel freely in your country, the right to a job or earning a living.
I was listening to a lot of Michael Knowles lately, and I really like his. I never truly understood the definition of liberty. I guess I had like an immature perspective on what it meant. Like to me, liberty is just kind of do whatever you want. It's kind of synonymous to freedom, but I found he did a really good job on breaking it down on what it meant in the classical sense. And liberty is basically freedom plus responsibility. So it's the freedom to go do the things that will be productive and good for you, your family, and your community. So being able to go to work is liberty. Being able to provide for your family honestly is liberty. Being able to protect yourself, being able to speak your mind, being able to go out and venture and interact with other people and build something of value is exercising liberty. And it seems like today, and this was his argument as well, liberty has been confused with licentiousness, which is the whole degeneration of the family. The only liberty that the left cares about is apparently sexual liberty. You can sleep with whoever, there's no limits, there's blah, 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 do whatever, whoever, do whatever you want. You're free, but you're free to sin instead of being free to be virtuous.
To build. I would even argue that that's because it's clear that you and I come from mainly, we have libertarian leaning values and philosophies, but I would say that's one thing. There are different, and that's what's kind of neat also about the libertarian political sphere or philosophies is that they differ quite a bit. There's quite a few camps in libertarianism. And I find that is one I often wrestle with too, within libertarians is kind of like liberties versus licentiousness, or there's a difference between being able to have fun once in a while and like completely separating yourself from any form of responsibility.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. Like, it's the immature version of freedom that we have now is just basically freedom to do as you please and be a slave to your baser instincts and baser desires. Whereas liberty is the freedom to rise above that and do what is right and constructive.
Yeah, I would combine it with like a bit of Jordan Peterson almost. I would say liberty is basically freedom once you've mastered discipline.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
That would be a good way
for yourself at least. Yeah. So anyways, on that topic, today's main topic is wealth transfer. So we're going to kind of do a continuation episode on one of our very first episodes, which was, it wasn't titled very well. It was titled basically like the debate, like minimum wage, right? The fors and againsts,
which was really just the against us just ripping on minimum wage. That was one of the comments that I got from one of my friends. He was like, "So man, you presented it as the arguments as for and against, but basically fuck minimum wage."
Yeah, I heard that too. We had a few comments from listeners who were basically like, yeah, it was like your arguments were good. It's just it wasn't really a like for or against. And I was like, yeah, no, basically the mistake is we just mislabeled it. It should have just been arguments against minimum wage.
Yeah, our bad. We tried it. We failed on that one.
It should have basically just been like Thomas Sowell approach to minimum wage.
Pretty much.
But yeah, so today we're going to continue a little bit on that because I remember mentioning some data in that episode about the wealth transfer. So today, not minimum wage, but we are going to probably mention it because we're going to talk about the massive, massive wealth transfer that has happened in the last 18 months to 2 years, really. And we're going to talk about kind of why that has happened and probably why we'll take a position already, Jason, why we don't think that's okay. And not necessarily not just that we don't think it's okay, but we don't think it's okay because of how it happened specifically. And that's the big problem. So, and stop me whenever you want, man. We're just going to have an open discussions. I definitely have some data to read out, but yeah, go ahead.
I like how you framed it to start is we're going to take a position. And I think that's something like obviously our position comes clearly across in our discussions and our episodes. It's our philosophies are pretty obvious, but that's something that I want to do more and more is be like, this is our position, clearly stated, and here is why. So when we're talking about the wealth transfer, we've heard it for the last few months, how much the top, umpteenth percent has really accrued such a massive wealth. And when you compare it to the average person, the detriment that has happened to the common man. And this episode would be ripe for memes. It's money printer go burr. That plus regulation is exactly what has happened. So, Will, I'll let you kind of. You were going on a train of thought there. What has happened to create an environment where all of a sudden your billionaires have seen their values double, triple, 1.5x, accrue billions and billions of net worth?
Yeah. So I'll actually tie it to what we were chatting about before we kind of officially delved into this, which was we mentioned the charter. I was actually looking again at the charter. I studied it quite a bit for history a while back, but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just check the kind of the first main points of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada again last night, and I did. And one of the first points is basically the right to work, and it's not the right to like have a job, but it's basically allowed to earn a living, essentially. I don't have it up in front of me, but don't quote me, but that's essentially what it means. That is something that has been completely prohibited in the last 18 months. And that's really what I want to stress from the get-go here is because of the lockdowns or restrictions, call them whatever you want, where you are. It all depends, where you are in the world. But some form of lockdown or restriction or both have occurred. For instance, Jason and I were joking a few episodes ago. It was illegal to get a haircut until a couple weeks ago, right? I don't think in 2019 you could have made enough jokes for people to think it was even like it wasn't more than a crazy hyperbole of a joke to say in 2 years you won't be allowed to get a haircut.
Well, it's like you said before we started recording. What's the difference between a conspiracy theory and reality? 6 months.
6 months. In
And
many
it's
cases,
true.
it has proven true this last 18 months. Once
If
again,
anything, the whole pandemic nonsense has vindicated conspiracy theorists time and time again. Now, is there conspiracy theories? Yes. Is the
yeah,
moon
of
landing
course.
fake? I don't think so. Is the Earth flat? Pretty sure not.
Yeah.
But but things like this, like, hey, is there like a global elite that's basically trying to create a new feudal society where a very, very small percentage of people own everything and you'll own nothing and be happy? I don't know. It was right in the literature of the IMF.
So yeah, so here's one thing I'll mention straight out is yeah, it was the IMF who said basically, the 10 points with it, what is it, 2030 or whatever it was, like in the near future, you will own no property and be happy, all of these things, right?
So tell me, who will
And
own the property then?
yeah, exactly. And the funny part though is I Googled it because a lot of it was, all conspiracy theories. So I Google it, right? I
It's
Google basically like you will have no property and be happy or whatever.
black on white.
Yeah. In the top 3 searches, 2 of them are about how that's a conspiracy theory. And the third one is the IMF direct quote saying, this is our plan for the next decade or whatever the hell it is, or 20.
Yeah.
I forget what their end date is. But
And then every single westernized country, we must build back better. I was like, oh, where do you get that slogan from? Look at the
yeah,
IMF also.
yeah. Or the
IMF
new
International
normal.
Monetary Fund.
Yeah. Or the new normal. I'm like, no, can
Oh,
we just go?
oh,
Mine is, I wish mine would catch on, which is back to basics.
oh,
That's mine.
better. There you go.
Yeah. Back to basics. Anyway,
Wake up, sheep.
so can't get a haircut 2 weeks ago. There are people, let's just say Canada, because we are in Canada, so we'll talk about our own country, but that could not work. And then there's arguments, the government didn't allow them to work, but they paid them, which I'm like, it's fair if something happens and you actually do not allow someone to physically earn a living, then yes, I think it's your role at that point to make them be allowed to live and feed their family. Whether we agree with, how it was done or whatever, I get it. I get that argument. But this is all these are all pieces that go hand in hand with just how quickly and massively this wealth transfer occurred over the last 18 months. The big thing that bothered me is that you could see around us very small businesses that weren't rich or weren't making an insane amount of money. They basically were making enough money to pay their employees close to minimum wage, maybe feeding their families, things like that. They were forced to close while keeping major mega corporations open. That's the thing that just killed me, is the Amazons of the world. Like, oh, well, Amazon's online. You're like, yeah, but how does it work? People work in a warehouse. They have to distribute things. They have to load things. They have to unload things. Those are people that interact with each other. But that was fine. And then the Costco's of the world, or the superstores of the world, or the Loblaws of the world, those were fine. But boutiques who actually make a much tougher living because they actually sell niche things, we're like, no, that's fine. We're just going to leave the box store open that don't specialize in anything, but they sell all of these boutiques products combined. We'll allow them to sell your goods.
And
That's something
there's
that
so
just
many arguments you can do or points you can use to pick that apart. Number one, if the whole idea is that you're trying to create physical distance, wouldn't you want your people to be shopping in decentralized locations instead of funneling them all into one box? It would make
yeah,
more sense to close the big box stores, leave all the mom and pop shops open. So that way, instead of putting 100 people into two
Yep.
stores, you're putting 100 people into 20 stores.
Yeah. And another great example of like the insane rules is from the get go, they started doing restricted hours. And I remember the one specifically, one case was LCBO in Ontario. So whatever sells the entity of stores in Ontario that sells liquor, alcohol, they decided to basically reduce all hours and days. So they had closed 1 or 2 days a week. Plus, they had reduced the hours of when you can get alcohol, but you were still allowed to buy alcohol.
So you're
So you
funneling
just
most
packed
likely.
more people.
So you
Yep.
most likely have greater demand because you have greater stressors, and you have reduced offer. So you're going to have just a ton of people getting
Not
jammed into a very confined space very quickly.
let's also like just quickly not to get into mental health, but not only is it greater stressors, you have not allowed thousands upon thousands of people to work at their own jobs. So what else are they going to do all day? That's not only it. Like there's a lot of grown people who are just, twiddling their thumbs because they could not open their barber shop the next day, or they could not sell this trinket or offer this service, but they can go get some booze and
And
get
who
pretty
are you
depressed
to
about it.
say? Who are you to say which business is essential and unessential?
Yeah. Yeah. That's another one that bothers me a lot. If you can if you can provide food for your family that day, your job's essential in
All
my
right,
eyes.
I'm going to permit myself to be go full conspiracy theory for a second, but I'm just going to lay out how I see things. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm kooky. Tell me where. Just poke holes at me. Like, give me a hard time.
All right, I'll try.
So right now, over the last few months and year and a half, you've essentially you've taken your most independent people, your small business owners. So you also know there's the tax loopholes, there's the independence. You're not working for someone else, you're working for yourself. You're providing value, you're hiring other people. You're taking your most independent, most entrepreneurial, most productive people, and you are forcing them to now be dependent on government. You're forcing them to have reduced income. You're forcing them to basically play by the state's rules. Okay, so you do that. So what do? Now you're the benevolent government. So you said, hey, no problem. I understand that the the Rona closed your business. No, Rona didn't close your business. I closed your business. But
Yeah.
we'll blame that.
Yeah.
So the Rona closed your
I
business, but
sorry, just as it's my pet peeve. Again, you don't even have to be for what we're saying. You can be against it, but please stop saying, "Oh, it's because of COVID." These things are not because of COVID. They're directly because of edicts from your government. They are. And then you could say indirectly this and that, blah, blah, blah. You are still factually, it is your government who has prevented you from doing these things.
exactly,
Sorry, carry on.
no, that's why I want to stress that quick, and I figure you're going to jump on that because that is something that I hear a lot too. That well, they say new normal less now, but that's
Yeah.
another pet peeve.
But like, oh,
Okay,
I can't give you a hug. COVID. And you're like, what?
yeah. But anyway, so you take these productive people and you now make them dependent. So you're the government. You say, "Hey, no problem. I know, the beer bug. It closed down your business, but I got you. Here's employment insurance. Here's this. Here's program. Here's this dollars. Here's that dollars." Okay, so we're talking about wealth transfer today. This person now has to sell their business or close their business or either way lose their income. So now what do? Now they're dependent. Now they're still paying bills. They're still paying to corporations. They're still have their regular services. Still have to buy automobiles. They still have to do all the things just
Taxes.
to maintain life. What you're essentially doing is creating now a dependent class and a, a an owner's class. You're creating kind of serfdom essentially, and that's something
Mm.
that we're seeing a lot in Moncton now, where house prices have been always low. Your average family home was, call it, $100,000 to $200,000. 200,000 in the metropolitan areas, 100,000 in the more rural, sometimes even less. Very affordable to get into a home. Now you have fewer people who are working, more people who are dependent on the government, so that A incentivizes the people who are dependent to vote for greater government and greater social programs, which only transfers more wealth from the people who are still working to the government through higher taxation and inflation that we'll get to it later on. So you create this dependency class, and now you have people who are renters for life. That's where the term landlord comes from. It's from the feudal societies.
Yep.
And in Moncton, we're just building apartment buildings on apartment buildings on apartment buildings like it's going out of style. And I know plenty of people who are in their 20s, even 30s, who would say, I would love to buy my home, but I can't. So if you're perpetually losing, you're losing your ability to work and being dependent, or you're fortunate enough to work, but inflation is so high and you're forced to rent that you can never accrue wealth, and inflation and housing prices keep going up and up and up quicker than you're able to save up for the down payment. You never get to the point where you're your own landlord. You're a perpetual serf. All you
Yeah.
do is work, if you're lucky, to pay taxes just to make ends meet.
Which, if you look at most data regarding that these days, it's just a hockey stick,
It's
right?
just a
So,
hockey
like,
stick.
your and you had shared me an article to read for this episode about the Simpsons, and basically how the Simpsons aren't realistic anymore. They used to be a middle class family. It's not realistic anymore to own what they own with the jobs they have, or the one job they have. But yeah, hockey stick graph, in the sense that the cost of housing isn't even close to what the average household income is, compared to what it used to be. If you put both of those lines together, right?
So my tin hat theory is that this pandemic, assuming that the mainstream narrative of just it happened is completely true, we'll give that big chunk of grace
Like
to the
like
mainstream media.
like
But
that it happened from bats or
yeah,
the lab.
exactly. Well, let's give that to them. Let's just
All right.
say, even at that, it's the biggest tinfoil hat. It's the biggest godsend to governments who want to centralize power, because it gave them the complete freedom to print money ad nauseum, to indebt their people, to present a problem and to present the solution. And I've always said, if someone presents you both a problem and a solution, turn the other way and run, because they are guiding you in a way that's advantageous to them. So if someone shuts down your business and then gives you money to compensate you for it or to help you out, it is not help. It is serfdom. Tinfoil hat off. But tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I stayed fairly quiet because there you go. Because I don't have much to challenge there. It's not even a conspiracy. You just basically propose an idea. This being a pandemic and what has happened over the last year to 2 years, this would be a great opportunity to do exactly what you said. So I don't even see it as a conspiracy theory. It's just
I guess the conspiracy theory is that you and me come from the side of skepticism to centralized power, where the normies who watch CBC and CNN all the time come from a place of appreciation of centralized power and think that centralized power have their best interests at heart.
Yes.
Where we're like, that's never happened.
Yeah.
Do I think that our leaders are Stalin? No. But do I think they truly care about us? No. They care about electing, re-elected, enriching themselves, their pet, their dog, scratching their asshole, and then they care about you.
Yeah, no. I think the people believe in, first of all, I would say two things: the competency and the benevolency of powers at hand. Yes, I think is just absolutely ridiculous how much faith people have in that. And again, it's you've seen it time and time again, just like at the 20th century. It's just like, why? I don't understand. Anyways, with what you were saying, I brought up a few numbers here. These are American numbers, but they can give you, a very good impression of what has happened here. So these are mainly due to lockdowns or restrictions. In the US alone, over 76 million people lost work between March 2020 and January 2021. So that's not even a year. That's about 10 months. That's the Department of Labor. Nearly 100,000 businesses have permanently closed. That's Yelp and CNBC, if you guys want to check it out. In fact, I believe it was also Yelp. I don't have it up here, but I remember it was something like almost a third of businesses across California or LA, I forget if it's just the city itself. I think it's California, are permanently done. Think about that. And that was also from Yelp. 12 million workers had likely lost employer-sponsored health insurance during the pandemic as of August 2020. This is from the Economic Policy Institute, which I also think is pretty ironic, right? You prevent people from working, therefore they don't have health care, and we're in the middle of a pandemic based on, healthcare. So again, it's just kind of like, what are we doing here? And this is where we're going to get really into the wealth transfer. So we've talked about, these are stats from basically the middle class, right? These are regular people, hardworking people who were not allowed, not able to work, to open their businesses on a day-to-day, Here are the numbers of the rich folks and where that wealth has gone.
And rich folks, I mean, you can fit them into a short bus, how few people this is.
Yeah. And for the sake of the time here, we're going to talk about I think that I'll name the top 10. But since 1990, 1/3 of billionaire, again, this is in the US. Since 1990, 1/3 of billionaire wealth has been gained in the pandemic alone. All right. So from 1990 to 2021, billionaires have made over 1/3 of their money in the last 18 months. Think about that.
So from 1990 to 2020, they accrued, say, 67% of their wealth. And then they accrued half of that in 18 months, 16 months.
Yeah. Inflation adjusted since 1990, combined U.S. billionaire wealth went from $240 billion to $4.7 trillion in 2021. I'll just say that again. Since 1990, U.S. billionaire wealth combined $240 billion to $4.7 trillion in 2020.
Which is about, let's see, for that to a trillion, so 16. So that's about 19 times over in that amount of time.
There you go. I trust your math. Now, Forbes. These are we'll talk about the top billionaires here and just show you guys the wealth transfer. This is data from Forbes. So all of these numbers and all these names I'll give you, this is wealth of U.S. billionaires that basically have accrued in the last 16 months. So a total of $1.76 trillion. That's 60% increase in 16 months for these 10 billionaires. So the exact dates of when they calculated the wealth was from March 18th, 2020 to July 9th, 2021. So 16 months. Number one, Jason, could you have guessed this? I know you've taken a look, but I'm like, if we have a call,
the obvious one.
Yeah, if we had a call-in show, I think anyone would get it. It is Jeff Bezos, Amazon. And actually, we didn't mention it, and I don't have the number in front of me, but we talked about Amazon, and we'll talk a bit about it more here. But Amazon Prime, that's another thing, right? People are at home. So now it's some insane stat, and I forget, but it's like almost every American now has a Prime account. Like it's something insane. Like to Prime, like the streaming service. Anyway, so his net worth as of March 2020 went from $113 billion to $212.4 billion in July 2021. So in 16,
can I stop you for a sec?
Yeah,
I just pulled out the calculator. So let's say whenever you get divorced, you lose 50% of your net worth. To have his net worth brought under 100,000, and now this is exponential, so you're working on exponents here. Bezos would have to get divorced 22 times consecutively I just
So
divide by 2 equal, and counted the amount of equal. So that's 2 to the exponent of 22 times. You'd
to
have
get
to
to where?
sub 100,000.
100,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
So basically, the average net worth
I
of your run of the mill person in their like 30s
I don't even
or
think Larry
40s.
King. I don't even think Larry King's been divorced that many times.
Yeah. So think you're dividing by 22 times.
Yeah. So anyway, so in 16 months, that was a wealth growth of basically $100 million.
Billion dollars.
Sorry, $100 billion. So 99.4 billion.
So here's the
And in
thing.
percentage, that's 88%, guys. 88%.
We could go through all the stats. At the end of the day, the tippy top have increased their net worth from absolutely absurd to absolutely crazily fucking
Yeah.
absurd.
Well,
Here's my step.
if
Okay,
I
go
just
ahead.
want, I'll run through it real quick for if people are curious. I won't run over the numbers. You guys I've just said it, 60% increase total over 16 months, $1.76 trillion of wealth transfer. Jeff Bezos, Amazon, number one. Number two, Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, mainly in stocks, not even revenue. But, anyways, Bill Gates, Microsoft, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, Larry Ellison, Oracle. So that's like a PDF and that shit. Larry Page, Google, Sergey Brin, Google, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, Steve Ballmer, Microsoft, MS Teams, that's the big one this year too, Jim Walton, Walmart, Alice Walton, Walmart, Rob Walton, Walmart, Mackenzie Scott, Amazon, divorce, Michael Bloomberg, Bloomberg LP, and Phil Knight, Nike, of all things.
Yeah, I didn't
So
expect
sorry.
that one.
Yeah, I know. Me too. Go for it.
So I have nothing against the mega rich. Nothing against the possibility of being a billionaire, even a trillionaire. I think that's aspirational. I think that it's excellent that you can to get to that point. You've
It
had to
leads to
had shake.
innovation. It
You've
leads to a better world
it,
sometimes,
it
most of
leads
the
to a
time.
better world. It leads to innovation. It leads to competition. It leads to increased standard of living. It
Yep.
increased productivity. Blah 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 blah. A lot of good comes from the companies. However, this is only counterbalanced if you don't have an absolute ass ton of regulation from government that makes things anti-competitive, that basically guarantees an oligopoly or monopoly in certain cases. If you don't have a shit ton of regulation that's hurting the small guy, like we said earlier, closing down small businesses, if you have a truly free market that kind of limits at some point, that was what I was wrestling with the other day. I think we spoke of this about one of our past episodes, where you want as little regulation as possible, but limiting the amount of companies you can have at the top, or not limiting the amount of companies you have at the top. Because
Right.
I find capitalism can get old. And yes, I use the example of like you, me, and Emily, and everyone else has companies, and eventually, like we all buy each other out until there's only one person left.
Right. You don't want an olig-
Yeah, oligopoly.
oligopoly. There you go.
So you need as little regulation at the bottom, but a good amount of regulation at the top that says, okay, you can't control more than 35% of the market share or something like that. You'll still grow, you'll still develop, you can still make side companies and build up something else. That's completely fine. Just you can't control the whole pie.
Right. Especially if the market grows, right? Again, if it's a new product or new need, the market is small and then it gets huge. So
Right.
you can also grow even though there's a cap on it, let's
But you
say.
can't have governments who can be lobbied. You can't have a shit ton of regulation on the small guy. You can't create incentives that basically turn people into serfs or tax cattle. You can't have regulation that incentivizes people to be lazy instead of being entrepreneurial. And that was a discussion I was having the other day with someone where she said she was kind of starting to figure stuff out. And she was like, man, welfare is kind of bad. It just makes people like stay home and do nothing. And she was like, wouldn't it be better if we subsidize like community college or something so these people would get jobs? I was like, yeah,
Carpentry, plumbing, yeah.
name your thing. There's a shit ton of trades in demand. I was like, yeah, it would be. And you've never thought politics, and over a glass of wine, you figured out something that apparently decades worth of politicians, of liberal politicians, weren't able to figure out. So I was
Oh
like,
no,
so,
they know. It's just you get a permanent voting base.
and then I asked her, I was like, okay, what would happen to the poor people if you did that? She said, well, they wouldn't be poor anymore. I was like, okay, so who would vote for the party of the poor? And you saw her go like, oh shit. I was like,
Mhm.
yep. And here's the thing, I have no problem with these big multi mega corporations as long as you're not incentivizing your peasant class, because that's what we are now, incentivizing your peasant class to stay
I
peasants.
mean, I mean, hey, I think I'm comfortable, but yes, when an individual has enough money to make a penis rocket and go to space for fun, yes, we're
But here's the,
peasants.
do you know what? I don't even have a problem with that, because the
I
amount of technology that comes out of that, and
I
Neil deGrasse
agree.
Tyson has been saying this for years too. The cost of space exploration, where there's nothing guaranteed, publicly funding that unless there's a military initiative, kind of like the space race in the 60s
Yep.
and 70s, is so large that you almost want it to be privately funded, because then you can take those dollars of public funds, put them to things that have like direct impact on the public. Let the
I
privateers
agree.
take the risk and develop those technologies. But then
Uh,
it comes back to this, my original point of, you can't let one entity control, or one or two entity control the entire market, because then you have that oligopoly or that monopoly, and
yeah.
then there's no room for competition.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Like he could have done far worse things with that money, right?
Yeah.
Far worse things. And I don't it's hard to put a value on innovation. So I agree with you. Innovation sometimes can be completely priceless, right? It could in the future save countless lives. It could bring so many things that we don't even know like can't conceive in our
Well,
minds.
that's the thing with new
Uh,
technologies like material science, let's say. Hey, I invented a new monofilament that I guess it reflects light pretty good.
hey, think of
Hey, good,
quantum.
good for you. Hey, that only costs $500 million for a
Yeah,
thin little monofilament that does a thing.
yeah,
Great. If you publicly
yeah,
fund that, that's 500 million that kind of didn't do a whole lot,
yeah.
but you'll get the Ristum lets you, decades down the line, when some other egghead figures out, oh shit, I can make like a solar panel out of that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, think of where we could be with if quantum gets somewhere someday, right? Um, but all I'm saying, I'm not saying he can't go to space. I'm just saying when a guy can go to space on his own with the penis rocket that he made, we are peasants in comparison. That's all. Because yeah, I will come nowhere close to that ever in my life. But anyways, I wanted us to finish just on a quick discussion here. Um, so you've kind of covered it a little bit here, and I covered it at the beginning. But the first thing I wanted to say in ending here is I've heard some people lately, as of late, who never were truly either fans or understood what capitalism was, now sarcastically argue for it just to piss people off who basically have lost their livelihoods. And that's this whole thing of like, well, the market, if the market doesn't allow you to stay alive, then that's the free market. You guys have always been talking about the free market, capitalism, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, that's not capitalism. When
Which makes us
powerful,
sound like the commies of, that's not real communism. But it's like, no,
yeah,
hang on.
but it's not. When you have a powerful entity over you that says you can't earn a living or solicit your services or your products or whatever it is, therefore you go bankrupt, that is not the free market. In no way is the word free involved even close to what has happened. So that's just bullshit. But anyways, I've been hearing this going on, especially in the internet, and I'm just like, oh my god. But anyways, you and I, just to finish on a quick discussion here. When we're talking about this transfer of wealth, what I find, and you've mentioned like you really have to make sure you don't create an oligopoly. Just a select few who end up controlling everything, whether they planned it or not. And you see that's partly what's happening, and that's where I want to end today. And so I want to discuss the fact that the power of these corporations like Amazon, for instance, hasn't just increased monetarily, it has exploded in other forms. For instance, information control. So that's a big one.
That's a
Another,
wealth transfer in of itself.
absolutely, it's huge. Another one is product and service monopolization. So again, if Amazon can kind of stay open while brick and mortar shops can't, then I mean, in no time will they monopolize absolutely everything. But the most important one I'd like to talk to you, curious what you think or what you have to say here is many of these companies, and this is I've heard Jeff Bezos say this, he's pushed for this, and we've talked about this in our minimum wage episode, is that he's now pushing for things like minimum wage, very high minimum wage, like, hey, nationally we should have $15 minimum wage.
Oh, yeah, you crush the mom and pop shops. That we covered that in our minimum wage episode. So it just
Yeah,
kills the competition.
absolutely.
That's all. It's easy. You're just going to get more market share by getting it through regulation because you're big enough to survive that type of initiative.
Right. But what's funny is that forever he didn't pay people those wages. And then when he's like, oh, people are just weak enough thanks to restrictions. Yeah, why don't we push for $15 minimum wage? I'm worth $1 trillion. Who cares?
And one
Right?
other thing that we didn't really touch on a lot, it's the money creation, the M1 and M2 money supply. When you have the government just creating dollars out of thin air, but still mandating that you pay taxes, even though they just make money out of nothing.
Yeah, that's another thing we didn't cover is that everybody getting money, even though they're forced, they can't work, but they get money, thankfully. That money doesn't exist.
It's not I don't even call it money, it's currency. Because
Yeah,
money has to be a store of value. That's one of the criteria of money, which is why precious metals work so well, because there's only so much of it that you can create. You can mine
it's
so much,
finite.
blah blah
Yeah.
blah. But a fiat currency that's not pegged to something hard, you can make it ad infinitum. So one of the big things about this wealth transfer here is you create a ton of currency and you let it loose into the market, or you put it into social programs or whatever. Well, ultimately, if you're let's say 100% of the dollars created in Canada went to the CERB, the emergency response benefit thing, the $2,000 a month to the people who lost their jobs because, big air quotes, of COVID. Okay, well, those people are still buying things with created dollars. But if they can't go to the mom and pop shop and they have to shop at those megacorps, then the created dollars within the space of 3 weeks essentially just got funneled over to your mega corporations. And
Right.
that's another big element of the wealth transfer, and has also widened the gap between the haves and the have nots. Because we've seen one of the biggest wealth transfers we've seen in the last few months has been the stock market. The stock market was just crashing until the Federal Reserve in early April of last year decided we're lowering rates and we're just opening up the printing press. Money printer go burr. Just for days and days and days and days. And then the stock market just took off like a rocket and has not looked since. We
Yeah, it
closed
hasn't
at
corrected.
the S&P 500 has closed at an all-time high yesterday. Tell me, how can we be at an all-time high? Are we at the all-time most productive we've ever been when still many people are out of work? U.S. jobless claims
Many
still.
people won't go to work.
Many people refuse to go to work because of created dollars, and that's what I mean when you're creating that serf class and that owning class and that noble class. That's a big part of that. You add restrictions, like everything that you've covered. You add oligopolies that I covered, and then you add just the funneling of dollars from government quickly to the people and right back up there. That's what you get. There's no way around it.
Isn't that called I think it's the Catalan effect, right? Where basically when you create, basically you print money, it goes to the richest folks first, or the people
It always funnels to the same
with
place.
with the power of that currency power first. Therefore, when it gets to the little guy or hasn't been spent by the little guy, if he wants to save it, it's worth nothing.
Yeah, it's been used. Dollars have, if you're going to create dollars, they have their most value the first time they get spent. Because let's say I give you
Yeah, exactly.
$100,000 and you get to go, say, buy lumber. You're going to buy $100,000 worth of lumber at the price it is today. You're going to deplete the whole lumber yard. Tomorrow, when the contractor shows up, well, the company had to do a rush order Well, they paid a premium to get that rushed over. They paid the rush delivery fee. Now the producer, oh shoot, I got to get my guys to work overtime to make more wood. So now their cost goes up, so the price of wood went up. So if you can literally counterfeit dollars, which essentially money printing is, it's called, it's called quantitative easing with governments do it. It's called counterfeit when we do it. But
Right.
if you counterfeit dollars, which essentially what money printing is, whoever gets to spend them first gets the full amount of energy because it hasn't had time to disperse through the supply chain.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a good place to end it. The last thing I want to say is when it comes to, I'll just say this. Next time you hear a billionaire like Bezos or Gates saying, oh, I just think it's so unreasonable that we don't have a minimum wage of $15 or $20 or $30, wherever we end up, please do not go to the emotive first, because none of this is about caring for their own employees. It's about destroying their competitors. And in fact, at this point, it's about cutting them at the knees while they're down. So please do not and again, go back to our minimum wage episode if you want the arguments against minimum wage. I think we made some pretty good, fair ones. But whenever you hear a really, really rich guy talk about minimum wage, an insane amount of minimum wage, it's not about caring for his employees or all people around his country or the globe. It is about destroying the other guy who he's competing against.
Have a nice day, everyone.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So that was it. Take it home, man. Close it off.
All right. Well, everyone. What is this? Our 24th episode, 25th episode? I can't forget.
No, more than that. We've been on for 6 months straight, except for last week. But
okay,
yeah,
so about 26.
I think over 6 months. Yeah. Let me check here.
Well, whatever. While you look at that, everyone, thank you very much for listening. I hope this was informative. I very much enjoy that we're being a little more risque, that we're really espousing our points of view a little more clearly. I know they always came across, but we're really just stating them. If you agree, if you disagree, talk to us. We're reachable. Find us on Facebook, find us on Instagram, find us on Locals, find us wherever. Yeah. And if you want to come on and discuss, if you think we're full of shit, or you just want to vent because you agree, hey, come on. We enjoy having guests. Yeah,
and send us an instant message, and we can and we can, or a DM. Sorry, DM. I'm not cool anymore. And we can tackle your question or your debate or whatever it is. Happy to do so. This is what it's all about. It's about thinking for yourself and being able to have original thoughts. And Jason, correction. This is episode 28.
28. Oh, wow.
So there you go. Yeah.
So I think it's the indie mindset. I'm not the social media guy, as you can tell. It's the indie mindset on Instagram, the independent mindset on both Locals and Facebook. And we do have a email as well, but just find us on the social media.
Yeah, at the indie mindset, the indie mindset at gmail.com.
So everyone, thank you very much for listening. I hope this is informative. And fire back at us. We'll be glad to talk to you.